Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Graham Church of God Facebook Live. Pastor Dwayne and Stacy aren't in today. They had to go out of town. They should be on their way back. Or if I know Dwayne, he's probably sitting at Chili's wishing they still had the all-you-can-eat soup. I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep you here. But y'all are stuck with me today. I apologize, but it's just the way it is. I guess I better start off with the opening text. The opening text today is out of Daniel 3. Daniel 3, verse 7. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Thank you. So, it's pretty obvious in the world we live in today. I mean, it's just full of evil. Everywhere we look, there's evil things happening. Or as Danny would tell us, the world has turned to a reprobate mind. Evil is good, good is evil. And people think that that's just the way it is. So, what do we do when we're persecuted? Do we stand strong? When you're persecuted for trying to live a righteous life, stay faithful to God, do as we're supposed to do, stay on the narrow path, as they say. How would you handle it if you were bullied, made fun of, threatened with being arrested? There's all kinds of stuff going on right now. There's people in other countries that are being arrested for praying in public. And, thank God that's not happening here yet. But who knows? How would we handle that? If they threatened to arrest you for praying, would you still do it? Would we do it? Would we do it openly? Would you do it behind closed doors? Would you praise God in front of the police officer coming to take you to jail? I would like to say that I would, and I believe that I would, but I guess it's hard to say that unless you're in that situation. So I want to talk about a couple people who stayed righteous and faithful in the face of persecution in the Bible. And I'm sure you've all heard this. I heard these stories growing up as a kid. But as we like to tell our youth kids, I feel like a lot of people just take these as stories in the Bible, like it's a storybook. You hear these stories growing up. Do you really put yourself in the place of these people? Do you actually feel what they were feeling? It's not just a story. This stuff really happened. And that's what I try to get through to them. And as a kid growing up, that's what I thought. I heard all these stories. I went to church. You hear about Jesus dying on the cross for our sins. And at that point, it's just a story. It's like, oh man, it's a horrible story. It ends up pretty awesome, but it's horrible. But he had a mother. He had a family. He actually went through this pain, and it's not just a story in a book. All this stuff actually happened. So, in Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar, he had made a golden statue and commanded the people to bow down and worship it when they heard a certain music. So Daniel chapter 3, 1 through 6 says, King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet high, 90 feet wide. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to assemble the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the rulers of the province to attend the dedication of the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, all the rulers of the provinces assembled for the dedication of the statue the king had set up. Then they stood before the statue Nebuchadnezzar had set up. A herald loudly proclaimed, People of every nation and language, you are commanded, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music, you are to fall face down and worship the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. So that right there, I mean, that sounds pretty scary. I don't know how many of you burned your finger. It hurts. To be thrown in a furnace for not bowing down and worshiping this idol, I feel like that would be pretty scary. There was 3 Jewish men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We've all heard this story. They refused to kneel before the idol. The Chaldeans ran to the king and told him, like a tattletale. We all know what those are. So I guess, they wanted to see him get in trouble. I don't know if it was jealousy or what, but Daniel 3:12-18 says, "There are some Jews you have appointed to manage the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men have ignored you, the king. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Then in the furious rage, Nebuchadnezzar gave orders to bring in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar asked them, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the gold statue I have set up?" I lost my place. Sorry, guys. Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music, fall down and worship the statue I made. But if you don't worship it, you will immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who can rescue you from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden statue you set up." So they knew what was going to happen to him. He told them. Everyone told them. Everyone was aware. Yet they stood tall and stayed faithful to God. That right there in itself, that's pretty powerful to me. And as I said before, I would hope and pray that I could have that kind of strength. But then, how do you know if you're not in that situation? Well, these guys did. And this enraged the king, and he had them thrown into the fiery furnace. So Daniel 3:19-23 says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He gave orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than what was customary. And he commanded some of the best soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, throw them into the furnace of blazing fire." So these men, in their trousers, robes, head coverings, and other clothes, were tied up and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Since the king's command was so urgent and the furnace extremely hot, the raging flames killed those men who carried Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell, bound into the furnace of blazing fire. So like I said before, they knew what was going to happen. They were told that if they didn't bow down to this idol and this king, that they were going to get thrown in the furnace. And that's exactly what happened. So once again, just ask yourself, how would you react in that situation? Would you stand tall? Would you stay faithful to God? I mean, it sounds like the fire was pretty hot. It killed the men who got near it to throw them in. So, that being said, like we all know how this story goes. But let's get forward to Daniel chapter 6. Say, guys, I think this can be pretty short. So there was a new king, Darius. He set 3 new governors to be over 120 new satraps. So a satrap is pretty much a governor in like the Persian Empire. So there was a governor named Daniel that quickly distinguished himself from the other governors and satraps. They were jealous, so they came up with a plan to get rid of him. They talked King Darius into making a royal statute saying that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except for the king shall be thrown into the den of lions. So Daniel, being a man of God, he knew what would happen again. And what did he do? Well, in Daniel 6, chapter 10, it says, When Daniel learned that the documents had been signed, he went into his house. The windows in its upstairs room opened towards Jerusalem. And 3 times a day he got down on his knees, prayed, and gave thanks to his God, just as he had done before. So I want y'all to notice, it says with his windows open. He could have went and did this in private, served God where no one could see it, where he wasn't in danger of being thrown into the lion's den. He chose to open the windows so everyone could see, because he wasn't ashamed. He stayed faithful, stayed righteous to the God that we all serve. So it would have been very easy, for him to just pray to God in private. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting sometimes. He chose to make his faith known, completely unashamed. And I feel like that's how we should all be. Sometimes we come to church and, I don't know, maybe we're a little embarrassed. Maybe we're just not in the mood, but we have praise and worship going on and just have people standing there like this and these mean looks on their face like they're just, they'd rather be anywhere else. But I believe when we come in here and worship God, it should be a public spectacle. We should lift our hands, show God how much we love him, show him that we're not scared for people to see it. No matter what the consequence is. Luckily here in America, we don't have many consequences for doing that in public. It's a lot worse, and I've been seeing a bunch of stuff online. It's a lot worse in other countries. Like I watched a video the other day of a woman getting arrested in Europe for praying on a street corner. And she wasn't even praying out loud. Yep, they took her straight to jail. But this king, he was kind of partial to Daniel. So it killed him to throw him in the lion's den. But the administrators and the satraps reminded him, rules are rules. So the king had him thrown into the lion's den. So now we have 3 men who faced certain death and still kept their faith in God and chose the righteous path. So I'm sure we all know at this point, but let's go back and see how it all works out for them. So in Daniel chapter 3, verse 24 and 27, it says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in alarm. He said to his advisors, remember this is after they had been thrown in the fiery furnace, Didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? Yes, of course, your majesty. They replied to the king. He exclaimed, Look, I see 4 men not tied walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like the son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of the blazing fire and called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, your servants of the Most High God, come out. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. When the satraps, prefects, governors, and the king's advisors gathered around, they saw that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men. Not a hair on their heads was singed. Their robes were unaffected, and there was no smell of fire on them. So, these guys... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Daniel 6, 19 through 20. So we all know that they had just threw Daniel into the lion's den. It says right here in verse 19, At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he reached the den, he cried out in anguish to Daniel. Daniel, servant of the living God, the king said, Has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to rescue you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke with the king. May the king live forever. May God send his angel and my God sent his angel and shut the mouth of the lions, and they have not harmed me. For I was found innocent before him, and also before you, your majesty. I have not done harm. So they couldn't see God with them. They didn't know what was going to happen. They had faith. They stood against the persecution, the things of this world, the idols, and all 4 of them came out alive. So not only did God keep these men safe, but check this out. This is what I thought was pretty awesome too. So Daniel 6, 25 through 27. Then King Darius wrote to those of every people, nation, and language who live on this earth. May your prosperity abound. I issue a decree that in all my royal dominion people must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues the deliverers, he performs signs and wonders, and in the heavens on earth, for he has rescued Daniel from the lions. So, Daniel 3, 28 through 30. Back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar explained, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel and rescued his servants who trusted in him. They violated the king's command and risked their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. Therefore, I issue a decree that anyone of any people, nation, or language who says anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb, and his house made a garbage dump, for there is no other God who is able to deliver like this." Then the king rewarded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, not only did God bring them out, but the kings who saw this, and they saw the power of God, they saw the power of faith, it completely changed the way they looked at life. So, y'all just remember, and this goes for everyone in here, but you kids, you teens, when y'all are going through this stuff, when you choose the righteous path, you never know who's watching. You never know who you're leading to God through your faith and your actions. So, something that I thought was pretty cool about this, so all of these men had something in common. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were actually all friends. But Daniel 1, 3 through 4, it says, "The king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the Israelites from the royal family and from the nobility, young men without any physical defects, good-looking, suitable for instruction and all wisdom, knowledgeable, perceptive, and capable of serving in the king's place. He was to teach them the Chaldean language and literature." So Daniel 1, 17 through 20 says, "God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding in every kind of literature, wisdom. Daniel also understood visions and dreams of every kind. At the end of the time that the king had said to present them, the chief eunuch presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king interviewed them, and among all of them, no one was found equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah." Of course, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. "So they began to attend the king in every matter of wisdom and understanding that the king had consulted them about. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and all the mediums in his entire kingdom." So there was something special about all these men. God had big plans for them, and I really think that's why the devil tried so hard to take them out. And it didn't work. They stayed faithful. So that just goes to tell you, if you're being attacked or persecuted for your faith and standing firm in your beliefs, like how special must you be to God if in his plans for your life, for the devil to be attacking so hard. And I feel like there's a whole story in its own with that right there, but I like to think that, and I've heard this plenty of times, but if the devil's not attacking you, then you're not living right. Because why would he need to send you down a road that you're already headed down? So I just pray that I can stand firm in my beliefs if it ever comes down to it. And I truly believe years ago that I probably would have failed. And actually at one point, it might not have been a big 20-foot statue, but I was kneeling down to idols and the things of this world. I was putting God on the back burner. I believed in God. I knew who He was. I knew Jesus Christ was my Lord and Savior. I was not living for Him. And people don't realize sometimes that there are other gods, there are idols, and it doesn't just have to be a statue that you're kneeling down and worshiping. You see everyone these days with a cell phone in their hand. Sports. I used to be real bad about loving my sports. I still like them, but I don't let them affect my day. I don't have to watch them. If I miss the game, I'm okay with that. And honestly, I just want to say that I thank God that sometime around 14 years ago, He sent a pastor to this church that would stand up here, preach the word straight out of the Bible. He wouldn't water it down. He don't care. He's not trying to hurt your feelings, but if you walk out of here all puffed up with your feelings hurt, He's just doing His job for God's kingdom. And I'd be lying if I said that I've never walked out of here all puffed up. And, He's talking about me. I know He's talking about me. So, if I'm feeling that way, that's something I need to change. And that's happened many of times. And every time I felt that way, that's something I've worked on. And I'm such a better man for it today. And I truly believe that God sent Pastor Dwayne here all those years ago because He knew that about 8 years later that me and my family would be walking through that door. And that's what I needed. I needed someone to hold me accountable. I needed someone to set me straight when I'm trying to go this way and I'm supposed to be going this way. To have a pastor that stands up here and holds you accountable and reads straight from this book. And God knew I needed that, and that's why He sent us here. Sometimes it's some hard truths we have to hear, but you just got to thank God for it. Don't get mad. You can get mad, I guess, but it's just God working on you, Conviction is a good thing. But just remember, guys, there's a time to stand, and there's a time to bow. And when we bow, it shouldn't be to the kings or the things of this world. And, that's all I have for you. I told you we'd try to get out of here quick. So, all of you on Facebook, thank you. Thank you for staying on after you realized it wasn't Pastor Dwayne. We'll be back Sunday with our regular scheduled church meeting.